Good evening. It's now 6 o'clock. I'm handing over to Dr. Sharon Harbour. Dr. Harbour, over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues. My name is Dr. Sharon Harbour, and I am the chairperson of the South African Registrars Association. We are delighted to have you here this evening. As some of you would know, the last year we had a survey out to registrars, and the purpose of the survey was to find out how far registrars were with their research and what challenges they were facing. One of the main outcomes of the survey was the fact that registrars were actually struggling to complete the research, especially in their allocated registrar time. So out of this came what we call as the SARA as the MMED Mastery series. Essentially, this is the series that walks and takes registrars hand in hand in terms of the research process. This is the final installment of our research, and tonight we're looking at publishing and completing your master's and completing your manuscript. Other topics that we've looked at were identifying the correct research topic. So how you as registrars can pick research topics that are interesting, but also not PhD topics, which are too broad for you to finish in the allocated time. Looking at issues in terms of methodology and what methodology you should be aware of, what's important for us as registrars. And the third installment was taking a look at biostatistics. So the basics of biostatistics for our kind of research and where to go to find more information. Tonight, I'm particularly excited about this topic. So tonight we'll be talking about completing your manuscript as well as publishing. And I think that why this is important is that it is our first step as thought leaders in terms of establishing ourselves as leadership, but also making a meaningful contribution to medicine. We have a highly esteemed presenter this evening, which I'm excited to present to you. But my comment to you all, or what I would like to implore you all to do, is please engage, listen, and I encourage you to utilize this opportunity to learn from those who have walked this journey many times before. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for this evening. Our first speaker for this evening is Professor Bhima. Professor Rahindra Bhima is an academic and clinician, and he currently serves as a professor of pediatrics and the head of pediatric nephrology clinical unit at the Nkosi Albert Luthuli Hospital. He is affiliated with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and he holds an MBCHB from the University of Natal, a PhD in pediatrics and child health, and has completed specialized training in pediatric nephrology, completing an ISN fellowship in 1999. Throughout his career, he has received numerous accolades, including the David Hepburn Award, the National Research Foundation, and several Medical Research Council grants for his research on kidney diseases in children. He has been recognized for his significant contributions to the medical field, having been named one of South Africa's top 100 achievers by the Mail and Guardian in 2003. And he was also awarded a fellowship in nephrology in 2024 by the International Society of Nephrology. Professor Bhima's leadership extends to international and national bodies, including the International Pediatric Nephrology Association, the International Society of Nephrology. He's an executive member of the South African Nephrology Society and an executive member of the Southern African Hypertension Society. He has served as an external examiner for various academic institutions and as a reviewer for research grants for the NRF and Medical Research Council and national and international scientific journals. His research work has been widely published, focusing on pediatric nephrology and other related fields, solidifying his reputation as a leading expert in the field of pediatric nephrology. Suffice to say, we are in very, very good hands in terms of completing our manuscript and publishing for this evening. Without any further ado, I would now like to hand over to you, Professor Bhima.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harbour. just supposing you believe all of that, I paid her to say that. Okay, so thank you very much for all the same. Okay, I think what we'll do is if we'll get into the presentation replays, the share. What happened to my slides? Can you see my slides? Hello?
Not yet, Prof.
Not yet. That's strange. Okay.
If you just open it again and you click on the share button, then we'll be able to see it.
Replace current share. Okay. Let's go. Okay. Can you see it now?
We can see it. Thank you, Prof. Just full
Okay.
screen.
So
You're
I'll
ready
put
to.
it on full screen. Yeah, that's great. Is that okay? Is
Thank you.
that okay? All right. Let me just get a pointer. Okay, that's fine. So the question is, sorry, let me just go back to the beginning. Well, I was given the task of looking at nuances of manuscript preparation, submission, and peer review. And when I got this topic by Dr. Rada, I said, well, that's easy because we're just preparing a manuscript. But then I realized she said it's for registrars. So registrars say, but I'm going to become a specialist in pediatrics. So why do I need to write a manuscript? You understand me? But writing a manuscript is very essential because it serves as part of your academic growth. But more importantly, whatever research that you do, etc., it's something that you need to disseminate. Right? It's fine if you do the research, but if people don't know about it, then what's the point of doing it? Because only you'll know about it and whoever collaborated with you. So it serves as a way of us as a tool for you to disseminate your knowledge. Most important of all, it builds professional credibility. Okay, you become recognized for the work that you have done, even if it's a small publication. I promise you, if you go to a conference or something, people will say, "Hey, I read your article; it was quite nice." You know what I mean? It's good that they recognize you for what you have done. See, so there's some important things in publishing a manuscript. Now, what kind of manuscripts can you publish for your MEd? By and large, it is mainly original research articles. Okay, so what that means is original research. So whether it's a retrospective study or a prospective study, I think the majority of you will be doing retrospective studies. But it must be something that's not done before. So it will be original research. So that's the most common type of publication that you have. Some of us will write case reports, excuse me. And case reports are usually a single patient, but you can go up to, I think, about 8 to 10 patients. But once you go between 10 to 20 patients, that becomes the case series. Okay. So case reports can be written up by you also. But I think now they are shunning away from that. You can't write up a single case report. So unless you got a series or something. Now, reviews, I don't think so many of you will be doing reviews. This is usually done when you're doing a PhD, where you do a scoping review or a meta-analysis. And so I'm not going to touch onto that. And I don't think so many of you writing letters to the editors. So those are some of the type of manuscripts that you write. And please don't write it on the doormat or your t-shirt or anything, okay? Write it properly on your computer. So choosing the right journal. And this is very, very important, okay? Because you must match the journal scope with your topic. Now, if you don't match that your topic with the journal that you're going to publish in, so you're going to send it in, and then the reviewers going to tell you, sorry, we don't accept this kind of thing. So you can't send a case report to a journal that doesn't publish case reports. You can't send a review article to a journal that doesn't publish review articles. So you have to check, does that journal actually take this type of? And if you're writing a highly specialized, in a highly specialized field, it might be better for you to send your article to a specialist journal than to a more general pediatric journal. But I think you can also speak to your supervisor and they'll guide you on it. Okay. Less important for you is things like impact factor and the audience you're going to address. I think most of you will be doing retrospective studies, etc., and it'll be more general pediatrics. So you publish in the general journals like the South African Medical Journal, South African Journal of Child Health, etc., which is fine. You understand? I mean, you're not really interested in this stage of your career on what the impact factor is. That's more for the established researchers. Okay. Um, for university purposes, if you take an impact factor of anything less than 2 at UKZN, you get shunned upon because they say you must publish in high impact journals so that you get better productivity units. And then you have to look at the type of journal. Is it an open access journal or is it subscription based? Okay, so the thing is, most open access journals are good because you get wider dissemination of your article to the audience. But the problem is you have to pay what we call article publishing fees, and then that can be work out quite expensive. You know, I just recently published an article in Nephron, and after pleading with the editor that I was from a low middle income country and that the rand dollar exchange was bad, I wrote him a long letter, and finally he said, okay, I'll give you a 50% discount. After the 50% discount and the university paid 12,000 rand, I still had to pay 35,000 rand. So it can work out quite expensive, okay, if you're publishing in high impact journals. But I mean, for your case, you're going to stick to more local general journals, and most of them are subscription based, so you don't have to worry. Now, when you choose your journal and you decided, okay, I'm going to publish in, say, the South African Medical Journal, right? Very important is that you must understand the author guidelines, okay? And I suggest that you go to the journal site. And the first thing you do is download and read the journal instructions very carefully. They have a section on instructions to authors. So if you don't do that, you're going to find you'll be disappointed when you submit your article, because if it's submitted in the wrong format, if you got the wrong font, or you haven't put in things correctly, you got the wrong referencing style, or the word count is off, completely off, it's going to be rejected and returned to you to say it's not suitable for this particular journal. So you don't want that to happen, okay? And then very important thing is, as part of your publication, you're going to have figures and tables. And what people forget is that figures and tables are actually standalone things. So if you used an abbreviation in your main paper, say in the introduction, you say chronic kidney disease, bracket CKD, it doesn't mean to say in the figure you can use CKD, because that's not going to hold, because that's part of the main body of the paper. So whatever abbreviations or annotations you put in, if anything is that you must specify that in your figures and tables, okay? And the figures and tables must align with the body of your paper. So if you say this particular thing, the number of patients, etc., were chosen, this is how I did it in my method section, and you say figure one must talk to that, okay? Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. Some journals want you to put figures and tables at the end of your article after the reference section, whereas others prefer it in the body. So you have to check what the journal requires. So understanding author guidelines, once again, as I said, is very important. But there is the committee called the International Committee of Medical Journal, and this committee decides who can be an author and who is not an author. So in most cases, you'll be designing the study, collecting data and analyzing it and interpreting. But if you do all that and you give it to your supervisor and he publishes it, you don't qualify as an author. You have to be involved in the whole study. That means from data analysis to preparing, being involved in preparation of the manuscript, to approving its final version, etc. And then only do you qualify as an author. Now, some journals, I'm not sure if the local journals do this, but definitely the more high impact journals, you'll see a section which says, what's the contribution of each author to this article? Okay. And so they want to know what each person on that did. So the statistician will done his part if he's part of the authorship. The person who's the primary researcher, the first author will say what he or she did. The senior author, who's the last author on the paper, will say what he or she did. So you have to specify those things. So it's very important that you know that you fulfill this criteria. Okay? So once you've got all that sorted out and you know exactly what you do, what I suggest you do is you look at one or two articles in the particular. So if you want to publish in the South African Medical Journal, look at how those articles are written, because each journal has a slightly different style of writing. So what I do is, if I want to publish in the journal, I haven't, for instance, I never published in Nephron. But what I did before I started writing the article, I went and looked at a few articles in Nephron to see how they structure the manuscript. Okay, but in the most journals, they have common sections. In other words, there's an abstract, there's an introduction, there's methods, the results, followed by discussion, and finally conclusion. Okay, and then, of course, you have a few additional sections that follow. Things like acknowledgements, the reference section, and of course, any supplementary material. So if you want to show, for instance, the raw data set, the more granular data, or you want to show uh, what you did, or you're referencing a particular type of classification or something, you don't want it in your article, you can say this is found in the supplementary material. Now, since most of you all will be doing retrospective studies, these will be mainly observational studies. And these observational studies is one type of an epidemiological study design, which takes mainly three forms, right? It's either a cohort study, a case control study, or a cross-sectional study. I'll come in the next slide and explain what we mean by each, right? But it is important to ascertain high quality reporting of these observational studies. Now, to help you with this, there is what is called the stroke guidelines, and I strongly suggest that you go look this up because it really helps you to write your article. So what is STROBE? It's an acronym for Strengthening and Reporting of Observational Studies in Epidemiology. So this is a set of guidelines, that provides 22-item checklists for the authors, and it helps them to improve the quality and transparency of the manuscript. And it's really, really very helpful. I mean, I think I got it referenced somewhere. Where did I put the reference? Well, I think it fell off. But anyway, it's very important that you follow this guideline, and it goes step by step and tells you exactly what is required for each section of your manuscript. Okay, so this is the stroke guidelines. So this types of study that I was talking about, which is the cohort study, the case control study, and cross-sectional studies. Basically, I mean, this slide is quite busy, so I'm not interested in all of it. I'm just going to look at study design. So if you look at cohort studies, these are observational, but they are usually prospective studies, and they follows exposed and non-exposed group over a period of time. So that you're taking one cohort and another cohort, and you look at whether they got exposed to, say, COVID or not COVID, whatever it is, and then you follow them up. Then you get the case control studies. These are observational studies also, but this is the one that you most commonly be doing, which is usually retrospective. And what it does, it compares cases with the disease to control. So let's just say you want to compare patients who are infected with COVID who developed, say, multi-system inflammatory syndrome compared to those that didn't develop it. And so you take 20 of those patients, 20 of retrospectively, and you compare them and say, well, the interleukin 6 was markedly raised in those with MIS-C, whereas it was not so raised in those with were infected with COVID or whatever. You're just doing a comparison, but it's one cohort compared to another cohort and retrospective. And then some of you will, of course, be doing cross-sectional studies. Now, these are once again where you assess exposure of outcomes simultaneously at one point in time. Okay, so this is once again usually prospective. Can be retrospective, but usually it's prospectively done. So there's a whole lot of tables. I won't going to go through this whole thing, but it tells you how it's done. And then writing a strong title and abstract is very, very important. And people don't pay too much attention to this. And so what happens is the reviewer looks at it, and if you don't write your abstract properly, they usually read it and then decide, I don't, or the editor says, no, I don't think so. This is good for this journal. You know what I mean? So the abstract is what really sells your article, right? So what is the abstract and the title? The title must be concise, it must be descriptive, and it must be searchable, right? So you have to choose your words very carefully. It must indicate what the study design is with a commonly used term in the title of the abstract. And you must structure your abstract where it summarizes the key findings and captures all the interesting parts of your research. Because you must provide in the abstract an informative and balanced summary of what was done and what was found. So, because it is so important, what I usually do, and this is just, I don't know how others do, but I usually work on the paper first, finish the introduction, methodology, and results and everything, write up the discussion. And when I've got a good handle on what the paper is, then I sit down and say, let me synthesize the abstract. It's the first thing that you see when you open an article, but I usually write it in the end because it's a synthesis of all your work. You understand me? So you got and that is what captures anybody's attention. If you ask getting table of contents, TOCs, from various journals, you just screen, you can't read every article, but you screen them. And if you see a title and a little abstract that is catchy, you say, oh, this is of interest to me, so I'm going to read that. So that's why it's very important for you to prepare a good abstract. So after you've done your abstract, you come to the introduction section. And then in the introduction section, you must state the problem and its relevance. You must review briefly any existing knowledge on the topic that's there so far and just summarize it. And yeah, once again, please, when you're writing an article and it is a, say it's a original article, your introduction is not a scoping review. You're not going to write everything from year dot to 2000 to October 2025. You know what I mean? A scoping review is something different. Okay, that's you won't get into because those are done by PhD students where you start off from the very first time and disease was described right to the present knowledge. Okay, so that is different. But here you're just going to write a brief summary of what is the key thing, and that introduction must be relevant to the research that you're doing. And then you must define study objectives and your hypothesis. Okay. Now, usually with retrospective studies, you can, but you don't usually have a hypothesis because most of them are just descriptive, observational, clinical studies. So if you, for instance, want to study the prevalence of bacterial meningitis at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital from 2010 to 2025, there's no hypothesis that you're just doing an observational descriptive study. Okay. So what are some of the tips when you are preparing an introduction? It states the purpose of the study and describe why the study matters. So funnels from firstly, what is known? So what's known about the significance of your work so far from previous work? Then it shows you what's unknown. So what are the specific gaps in knowledge that you are trying to answer? And from that arises what is your research question? Okay, so basically it's the aims and objectives of your study, right? And then it's very important that you keep your introduction focused. People have this habit of writing a 5-page introduction. I promise you, reviewers don't read that much. Okay, they are just interested in what is your study about, what work was done before, what's a gap, and what is. So you shouldn't be more than 3 or 4 paragraphs, and definitely not more than 6 paragraphs. Okay, because if you write a very lengthy introduction, you lose the essence of your work. And like I said, it is not a literature review. Remember, that is something different, okay? Right? Especially for original articles. And this is something that I also learned the hard way. When you're writing about something in the introduction, what was done previously is in the past tense. And then what is done currently must be in the present tense. And people seem to get this mixed up. Okay, so just be careful how you put it forward. So it ends up in the introduction by stating what the question is and the general approach, or by summarizing the principal results and the conclusions that are suggested. So the aim of my study is to do this, this, and this, and we therefore want to look at whether this drug is useful or not. So that tells the reviewer exactly what he is going to expect in reviewing find the methodology and the results, etc. Okay, so that's the introduction. Now, what about the method section? This is very important, okay? Because this describes your study design. It's usually the easiest section to write, because all you're doing in the method section is describing exactly what you did for your study, right? If it's a retrospective study, you want to say where the study was, etc., and where it was carried out, from what period of time, and what was the study design, and all that, and then explain how you arrive at a sample size, etc. And once you do your data collection and analysis then follows, you describe the settings, the location, and the relevant dates. And it's very important to include the period of recruitment, what was the exposure, what period of follow-up you had, and how you did your data collection. Was it getting it from a computerized database, or did you get it from bed letter, whatever it is, okay? Or you got it from NHLS laboratories, whatever it is. Then you must clearly define all the outcomes, exposures, what were the predictors, the potential confounders, and the effect modifiers. And then give the diagnostic criteria if any of them are applicable. Now, much of this thing will not apply to this more retrospective studies, okay? But definitely you want to define what's the outcomes of the study and what exposure you're looking at, etc. And then you have to describe all the statistical methodology that you use, including that used to control for confounders. Okay. Now for this, I would suggest that you speak to a professional statistician. Okay. Because all of us have some basic statistical knowledge, but if you are doing a little more complex study, you should get a professional statistician involved early in the study, because they will work out for you exactly what kind of analysis you need, how you should present it, etc. And I always tell my students that once you got that sorted out and you got your tables and figures sorted out, writing the paper becomes easy. You understand me? So those are the first things that I do. And then lastly, but not least, is you must get ethical approval for your study. Remember, there's no study, be it retrospective, prospective, case control, anything. You cannot start any study without full ethical approval. Okay? And I promise you, if you try and submit that to the South African Medical Journal, this is what you're going to have Prof. Dai looking like. Okay? She gets very angry. Right? So you must get ethical approval for your study. Now, how would you present your results? You report the number of individuals at each stage of the study. That is, the example, the numbers that were potentially eligible, those that were examined for eligibility, those that were confirmed to be eligible, those that were included in the study, and those that completed follow-up, and then these are totally analyzed. So the best thing to do is to create a figure with a flow diagram. So if you want to study, say, steroid-sensitive nephrotic, you say for 10 years, for the last 10 years, you say these were so many nephrotics that presented to that Inkosi Albert Lutuli Central Hospital. So many were diagnosed with steroid sensitive, so many were lost to follow-up, so many did this, and then finally you have the figure of the ones that are included in the study. So a flow diagram tells the reviewer, this is what you did in the study. And then at each stage, it also gives you all the reasons why you excluded some of the participants. Okay, right? Maybe they didn't have enough follow-up, or they they were lost to follow-up, or they did not. They became from steroid sensitive, they became steroid resistant. What you want to exclude them for that reason. So then you consider the use of, therefore I said you should consider use of a flow diagram, but you should also use text, tables, and figures very effectively. Now, this is where many of the registrars have a problem because whatever they have in the tables, they rewrite it in the text. So, they say a picture says 1,000 words, right? So if you got a table, you only pick the key things that you want to say about the table. You would say all the participants, the demographic data, clinical and laboratory findings are in table 1. So then in your result section, you must only write about the key things that you want to extract from table 1, not the whole table all over again. Because then you're just adding a lot of words to your paper and increasing the length of it without producing any effective knowledge, because the reviewer can read the table and see what exactly is there. So it's important to report only the significant findings, okay, whether they be positive or negative. And then you should give unadjusted estimates if applicable, and then confounded adjusted estimates, and then the precision. So example for this, the precision and the strength of your p-value is usually guided by your confidence interval. And this makes it clear where the confounders were adjusted for and why they were included. And there's this obsession of researchers, especially the more junior researchers, of writing in a p-value that they say is highly significant, p-value less than 0.0001. Great, it looks great. But it's a meaningless figure if you don't tell the reviewer exactly what the strength of that p-value is. And how would you measure strength? Well, it's measured by various things, by odds ratios, hazard ratios, confidence interval. So if you don't see if the confidence interval is very wide, you know that strength of that p-value is not going to be maybe you had a very small sample size, okay? And therefore you got a significant p-value, but the confidence interval is so wide that p-value becomes insignificant. So statistical significance does not necessarily translate into clinical significance, okay? The one common mistake that people make in the results section is they mix up methods with results, and then what they also do is they start interpreting the result. That's not the section that's not the section where you interpret the results. Okay? You must avoid doing that. Your result is purely what your study found. That's it. Okay, the rest of the interpretation falls under discussion. So that's very important. You got to be clear. And please don't say that we measured in the results section, we measured the estimated GFR using this one. That is methodology. That's not results. Okay. So you must only present what you found. And then, so when you start writing the paper, the introduction, the method section is the easiest to write. The results are exactly with the statistician help you to figure out tables and figures. Your supervisor will also assist you. You write your results section, etc. And once you got your results section done, then you start looking at all the literature in that pertaining to the article, and sense you start crafting a discussion. And the operative word there is crafting a discussion. It's crafting. Okay. A discussion is not just writing a whole lot of words to say I did this, and that article did this. You got to compare and contrast, make sure that discussion speaks to whatever work you've done, but at the same time, it also compares it to what was done previously and what new in your article. So you got to interpret the results in the context of the existing research. You got to summarize the key results with reference to the study objectives and give a very cautious overall interpretation of the result. You must consider what your objectives and limitations were, and this is very important. People write wonderful things about what they did, but no study, even those published in the Lancet or any journal, is without limitations, right? So you got to play devil's advocate and say, okay, I did all this work, this is how we did it, etc. In your method section, this is the result. The limitations of the study were, and in the end, when you discuss everything, so that the reviewer knows that this is why some section or some results may be slightly false. If you don't put the limitations in, they're going to ask you for it, okay? And you don't want that. You don't want comebacks for that. And results, you're going to compare your results to what were results from similar studies, and then to other relevant evidence that may be there, okay? Whether it was a review article, whether it was a meta-analysis, whatever it is. So when you're writing up the discussion, I would suggest that you look at a review article if there is one in that particular field, and then you get a good idea of what overall was done, because when people do a scoping review, they look at all the literature and put it together, and then look at the most recent ones. And then in your discussion section, also try and look at the most relevant articles and the most recent ones. Not to say that the older articles are not important, right? But that's what the reviewer is going to look for. Now, if you start referencing articles from 1970 and 1980, there's a lot of work that has been done from that time to now. So the reviewer is going to tell you, but what happens with this set of articles? Have you looked at it? So try and look at the most recent one. And then you must discuss the generalizability of your study, because if you can't generalize the study, then it's a problem. You understand? It might be applicable only to your population. Okay, so it might not be applicable to other populations. Okay, so you have to say that this particular thing only holds, because there's certain, if you get, for instance, you were writing about an epidemic that occurred in your area, it doesn't occur in the rest of South Africa or anything, then it's only applicable there. But it's very important for you to make that distinction, right? Then the last thing is I discussed limitations, and then it is depending on what your study is about, you must take into account sources of bias or imprecisions. Okay, so imprecisions are things like, if you say, for instance, if you're looking at okay, let me stick to nephrology because that's easier. If you're measuring glomerular filtration rate, we say glomerular filtration rate was measured by estimated glomerular filtration. So estimated tells you there's an imprecision in it. Okay, you looked at serum creatinine levels, and we all know serum creatinine levels are very imprecise. You understand what I mean? They don't give you a true reflection of what's going on, right? You have to drop your kidney function by 50% before you start seeing a rise in serum creatinine. But for your article, that may be the only information that you have, because we all measure serum creatinine. Okay, we don't measure isotope GFRs, right? So the thing is, you'll say, so we estimate it. So that's a limitation or potential bias in your study. Okay, and then you suggest future research directions. Now, but this is important when you, especially when you're doing large studies, etc., where you say that, look, this is what I've done and what I found, etc. But there's still gaps in our knowledge, or because of this fact that it was a smaller sample size or whatever it is, we need larger randomized control trials to show this association and prove causality or whatever it is. So those are future directions that you are telling the reviewer that you might have to take. And then the last part of your paper is writing the conclusion. Here you summarize your main findings and you highlight the clinical or scientific relevance of your findings, but please do not overgeneralize. Okay, if you're doing a small study, right, it's looking at 20 patients, you can't say that that is the best study, and because you did it now, that it applies to everything else. Okay, so you have to say the limitation of my study was that the sample size was small, etc. However, based on the findings, it is possible that obesity is associated with increasing obesity is associated with hypertension. Okay, so all you're saying is that this is the limitation of my study, but even though I had a small sample size, it is still useful to understand that this may be an association, therefore you need larger studies to prove it. So this was something I came across in one of the journals, and it said, what is the perfect conclusion about? So I'm not sure how good it is, but they do summarize, they do break it up into 4 things. You have to sum up. That means rephrase the introduction, summing up the key arguments, thoughts, and ideas mentioned in the essay body. Second thing is you should avoid cliches, right? Avoid repetitions, cliches, and other things that can make a conclusion trivial and boring. And then you have to give an idea to the reviewer what the study was. Leave the readers with some interesting ideas to consider, right? And then say you must impress your readers. And how do you do that? You have to make the conclusion brief, concise, but at the same time, it must drive home the point you're making. Okay, so your aim of your study was this, and therefore you're going to drive home that point. This is what I set out to do, and this is what I found and did it. So that brings us to the conclusion, right? And then comes the sections which are quite important, and that is acknowledgements and declarations. Now, it's very important that if you got ethical approval for your study, you acknowledge that, in your paper, in the method section, that ethical approval was obtained from the institutional local ethical review board, and you put your number there. It's very important to thank the institution that you did, where you did the study, the medical manager and the Department of Health or whatever it is. So those things are very important. If you have funding for your study, most of you won't be applying for funding, but just in case you're doing a study, part of a sub-study or something, you have to acknowledge the source of your funding and the role of the funders for your present study. Supposing you're doing a sub-study of a larger study, so for your MED. And then you must put in any conflicts of interest. That's very important, okay? So if you don't put in that, they will ask you for it, right? And then I mentioned author's contribution. Most journals now asking you, what does each author do? So it doesn't mean to say if you're head of department that somebody published an article, you can just put your name on it, okay? Because you didn't do anything. You understand me? So you have to put into that article what each author contributed. How are we doing for time? Are we okay? So what are the common pitfalls that we highlight during manuscript submission? And this is something that you should take note of. Things like ignoring journal-specific submission guidelines. I told you must read the instruction to authors. And that's very important because it tells you exactly how to format your article, what the word count is, what the citation style is, whether they want Vancouver style, Harvard style, or numbers, or whatever it is, okay? And then figure specifications are very important because some journals want the key to be below the figure, some want it on the side, some want it on the top, and whatever it is. Because if you don't follow all of that, the when you submit your article and the journal administrators look at it before they even send it to the editor, they're going to say, "Whoa, this article is not written according to the specification of the journal. Reject. They'll send it back to you." Then if you have inadequate or incomplete literature reviews that fail to establish the research context or even demonstrate novelty, okay, that can lead to a problem. So if you're doing your introduction, make sure you quote the most recent article and what's the most up-to-date knowledge in that particular subject. Then poorly formulated or vague research questions and hypotheses that make it difficult for reviewers to assess the study's purpose and relevance. And I get this very often when I review. Sometimes I have to read the article and then read it again, and I'm still finding out now what exactly is this author trying to say. You understand me? So you must state at the end of your introduction, and therefore the aim of my study was this with the objective of doing this, this, and this. You've got it. You've done it in your protocol, and so it's already there, but you've got to state it clearly. And submitting it in an inappropriate or mismatched journal without checking the journal scope and previously published articles leads to disappointment once again, right? So, like I said, you can't send a case report to a journal that doesn't do case report. You can't send a review to a journal that doesn't accept reviews because the moment it lands on the administrator's desk, they'll reject. Then if you had inadequate description of the study design and methods, right? This is very important, okay? Often laboratory researchers do this. Let's say we did a polymer chain reaction. They don't say exactly what method they used to do it, etc. For people who want to know that, if you measured a serum creatinine, you have to say it was measured by the isotope dilution method, or did you use Jaffe method, or whatever it is. And so that's very important. And then you mustn't, there is thing that way you will overlook the importance of clear, concise, and well-organized writing. Please, this is so important. Some people write in flowery languages. You don't want that, okay? You're not trying to impress a reviewer with your English skills, okay? And the other thing is they become very verbose or they use some jargon which nobody understands. Just put it in simple, straightforward language. Scientific language is simple, okay? You have to say what you have to say and then keep quiet. That's it, right? And then You often have poor presentation of results that undermine the manuscript. So in your results section, if you don't present it in a method, in a very well set of way, you're going to have problems because everything is going to be mixed up and it's going to take the reviewer a long time to figure out what exactly you found, etc. And reviewers don't want to do that. Remember, they don't get paid to review, so they're just doing the journal a favor. So put everything in a way that is simple for them to follow, and so they know exactly what you're doing and they'll be happy to pass your article. One thing that happens is if you're the first author, you go to your supervisor, he prepares an article, he corrects it, he does the track changes, etc. He sends it back to you and tells you, you know what, please, this article is now ready for publication. Can you just do the final editing and send it off to the journal? So what a registrar or whoever it is with the first author does is either don't accept the track changes or they don't do a proofreading of the article and then they submit it to the journal. And it becomes embarrassment when they get the journal, when the reviewer send it back to say that we don't understand whether you meant this or whether this was changed to this because it is still in track changes. So please, you must proofread of your article and edit it properly. Then, of course, there's the failure of disclosure of interest, conflict of interest, which you must do, funding sources, ethical approval, all these things are checklists. When we review, we go to a checklist of things to say, has he declared this, has he done this, has he done this, has he done this, has he done this. Then when you get your article submitted, let's just say it is suitable for the journal, it goes to the editor looks at it, he does a brief review, look at the article, he then sends it out to academic or associate editor to say, this is within your field, and the associate editors will read the article, make his assessment of it to see whether it's suitable, and then he'll also appoint reviewers, or he or she will appoint reviewers. Now, the reviewers will send you comments. Now, it's very important that you address those comments in a constructive way, right? Now, this is where, articles, we have problems because what people do sometimes, they write a paragraph and say, all the comments that review one made were addressed and highlighted in the article, and then full stop. You got to take every comment that the reviewer made, reviewer 1, reviewer 2, or sometimes reviewer 3, and address those seriatim. That means you say comment 1, this is what the comment for the review 1 was, your response to that. Comment 2 and your response to that. Comment 3 and so that it makes it easy for the reviewer to say, okay, these were my comments. If I'm reviewer at number 2 and I look at the comments I made, and then I look at what were the changes that the author did in the article, it must match. Okay, and then often journals ask you for one article which is got the changes, so highlighted, and then a clean copy of it. Okay, so you must address that properly. And then the other thing that happens is where you submit incomplete files, you forget to put, some journals ask for the figures and tables in a separate file. Now, if you don't send it, they're not going to have it. So it becomes a problem. If you are reproducing articles, etc., you must get permission for that from the publisher. Okay? And there's special copyright forms some journal asks for, so that you must submit to them to show that you've got permission. Otherwise, that becomes plagiarism and it's a problem. Okay? It's scientific fraud and you get fined for that. Often there's incomplete documentation at the time of submission, so you didn't document something or whatever it is. You need to put everything in so that the reviewer, when the editors look at it, they have everything on board. And then authorship issues. Now, this is very important. From the very beginning, you have to decide who's going to be an author, who's going to be a contributor, who's going to be acknowledged, and who's going to be the first author, who's going to be second author, third author, or the last author is obviously the senior author on the page. Okay, so you got to decide that well in advance so that when you submit your article, then somebody doesn't say, oh, well, I did this work, I should have been second author, I should have been, and then you change it around. The reviewers don't take presently to that, okay, and definitely not the editors. And the other thing is excessive citations and repetitive statements that do not add value. Please, when you're doing your citations, etc., it must be only relevant ones that you keep. it's no point in writing an article which is very descriptive and putting in 900 references. You understand? I mean, we just want the key references. And when you are referencing also, do not, especially if you're referencing from a review article or something, it's not that person who did that particular work. Okay. Reference the original author. You want to give the original author the credit for what he did, right? Not the person who is presenting it in his article. So those are some of the things that mistakes that people make. So I'm going to stop there because I think I went over time. I apologize for that. But thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'll take. Thank you.
Prof. Bima, that was excellent. Thank you very much. I know presenters are supposed to, or facilitators are supposed to say that you guys did a good job, but I wish I had this when I was doing my research. And I would just like to implore other registrars that I hope you took notes, or maybe there'll be a way for us to please get these slides. Because literally in some of your slides, I could look at my article and I was like, yeah, that was what I said first. That's what I wrote second. That is, and thank you. I think this was easy to understand and you presented it in such a way that someone can follow. So thank you very much, because I looked and looked and I was trying to figure out ways, especially for individuals who aren't used to publishing their research. This is gold right here. So thank you so much, Prof. We're really grateful.
You're welcome,
Just to
Dr.
point out the fact, thank you. It's also just to point out the fact that I know we have registrars here, but with the issue of unemployment in South Africa, we're also finding more and more junior doctors who are trying to publish either case reports or case series or things like that. And so as registrars, you're not just competing with your other fellow registrars, you're competing with other junior doctors who are trying to get their work published. So I think this is also something that they can benefit. Colleagues, we're going to wait till the end of both presenters to have our questions. Just to note that at the end of both presentations, we will also be having a questions and answers session. So thank you very much, Prof. Bima. I'd now like to hand over to Professor Dai. Professor Dai graduated as a medical doctor and specialized as an obstetrician and gynecologist at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She thereafter moved into the discipline of bioethics and law, where she was the founder and past director of the Steve Biko Center for Bioethics at Wits University Faculty of Health Sciences from the years 2007 to 2019. She is a professor of bioethics and law at the Wits School of Clinical Medicine and a member of the Academy of Science South Africa, ASIF. She is the immediate past chairperson of the UNESCO International Bioethics Committee and the immediate past vice chair of the board of the South African Medical Association. Some of her current activities include the chairperson of the SAMAREC Bioethics Advisory Panel, the chair of the Human Sciences Research Council Research Ethics Committee, the chair of the South African National Blood Services,
I think we lost Dr. Harbour.
I think we did lose Dr. Harbour, and I think we don't need for her to complete the bio. I can go ahead and start. Are you back, Sharon? Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start my presentation. I just want to say thank you so much to Professor Bima for actually setting the scene and covering, the topic so comprehensively. There's not much left for me to do, actually. So what I'm going to start off with is, look, I don't have slides and I'm just going to talk to you. I'm going to start off with some benchmarks for you. Benchmarks when you're planning your research or planning to put together a paper. So the very first thing you need to look at is my topic of the research. is it relevant? Is it something that should be done, or is it just another Me Too repetition? So make sure that whatever you do has relevance. Prof. Bima has stressed that. Once you realize, once you've confirmed that, yes, this has relevance, then you look at its social value. And this is how you integrate your ethics into your research methods. Ethics cannot be a standalone, side topic. It's got to be there as that golden thread running through your entire research. So your topic is relevant. Yes, it has social value, and I'll explain social value just now. And once you've confirmed to yourself that it has social value, then you look at the science of it, and whatever you do, you must have scientific value as well. Is it going to contribute to the corpus of research and scientific papers that's already out there? And once you've confirmed that, then start putting together your research methods, etc. And when you're doing that, look at the benefits of the research as well. Would the benefits outweigh the risks and harms? And this is what research ethics committees look at as well. They look at the benefits and the risks and harms. And if the risks and harms seem to be more than the benefits, it raises huge red flags. And this is when you see responses coming back from the research ethics committee rejecting your project. So as you're writing out your research, look at how you plan it, your research methodology, to try to ensure that the benefits will outweigh the risks of the research and the harms that your potential participants will be exposed to. Throughout this all, ensure that there's respect for persons, and that clearly aligns with the principle of autonomy. Make sure you get an informed consent, and make sure that you respect the confidentiality of your participant in research. And even if you're going to be doing retrospective data analysis, retrospective file review, make sure that whatever you capture does not include identifiers. These are things that we look out for when we, that's what I will look out for when I do my first editorial review. I actually look at, I do that editorial review in the stepwise fashion. Okay, the submission has come in. What's the relevance? What's the social value? Is there, is it going to actually contribute to the science? Okay, and if I feel, yes, it will, then I look at the benefits and I look at the risks and harms. I also look to see whether participants, whether the participants or even the data donors, whether their confidentiality has been respected. And remember, we're very bound by POPIA laws at the moment. So we're very strict on ensuring confidentiality. And last but not least is conflicts of interest. Everyone's conflicted. All of us have conflicts. Important to declare the conflicts of interest and also include how you've actually gone about navigating your activities on this research around your conflicts. For example, if you're an MMED student and you decide to do an MMED prospective project, then declare your conflict of interest on your information sheet. before you engage with your participant, you start off with your invitation, and immediately you say, "Hi, I am Miss A, B, and C, and I am doing this research as part of my MMED qualification." And here you've already declared your conflict of interest. So when it comes to social value, I stress social value, and I will stress that every time you see me and you interact with me, because I feel in any research, it's an essential consideration. The information that your study produces must be able to promote individual health and public health. Your research will have social value if you look at the endpoints and you see that your endpoints are related to clinical decision-making, and you also look to see whether clinicians, policymakers, and others are likely to alter their practices based on your study findings. That's really important. I know you're doing, many of you will do retrospective studies, but your retrospective studies shouldn't just be Me Too studies. Those studies also should have social value. And it is only if the research has social value that the associated risks, costs, and burdens of the research can be justified. So I think, if you take away anything from my little presentation, if you forget everything else that I say, but you remember social value, I think that would be really great. So in terms of journals and journal publications, as Professor Bima stressed, you need to familiarize yourself with the journal and the types of articles they have before you start putting together your write-up. I'm going to talk to you about the South African Medical Journal and our specialties that we've put together from last year, which has been, our specialties is specifically for you, our MMED students, I would say. So our SAMJ goes way back. It was first published in 1884. It's a monthly, peer-reviewed, internationally indexed journal. It's a general medical journal, and it publishes leading research which impacts clinical care in South Africa. So if you want to publish in the SAMJ, look at whether your publication is going to impact clinical care. Now, while we say it's a general medical journal, truly speaking, it's not limited to articles that have general medical content, but what the SAMJ intends to do is to capture that spectrum of medical and health sciences, grouped by the relevance to the country's burden of disease. And sometimes this includes research in the social sciences and economics that is relevant to medical issues around our burden of disease. And while I say that we include research in social sciences and economics, we do not publish qualitative research. So if you've done in-depth interviews, you've done focus group discussions, etc., please don't send to us. We do not publish qualitative types of research. And the types of articles that we carry research articles, we carry letters. And I'd like you to be cheeky and progressive. And as young registrars, do what I did when I was a registrar. I wrote letters to the SAMJ. And that's how I got into writing. If something troubled me, or if I saw an article that really didn't make sense to me, I would write a letter to the editor. Half the time it didn't actually get published, but when it did get published, it was really great to see it. At this stage in your careers, even before you finish your write-up, you can actually be doing editorials. We also publish clinical practice, case studies, personal, opinions, perspective, commentaries. And I know registrars of today. We have lots of opinions on situations within the country. There's nothing stopping you from putting together correspondence or a perspective article or an opinion article or a commentary on the situation in the country. So we know we have so many doctors unemployed. It's something that you could do as registrars. We have the Junior Doctors Association that is so active. Why not start putting together, formalizing your thoughts into commentaries or opinions or editorials? I'll just move on to the specialties. But before I move on to that, I want to just, and this is not a commercial, this is the truth. The South African Medical Journal is the premier general medical journal in the country. And while we publish very high quality research across various medical fields, some specialized research submissions are so highly specialized that they fall outside the scope of the SAMJ's core focus, and they declined for publication despite their value. And it really pains me every time I've got to go back to an author and say, look, your article is good, but unfortunately, it doesn't have a place in the SAMJ. You need to try a journal of anesthesiology or a journal of public health or a journal of child health. And then, I know the struggles registrars have getting into specialized journals. Look, I've been there years ago, and I'm not too sure that much has changed actually. I feel for you every time I say no to your article. So, based on that, and also because of the rapid evolution of healthcare technologies, particularly in the field of AI, we actually thought, and here we have a progressive head of publications, Diane Smith, who actually worked very hard to get the specialties off the ground. She worked with the SAMJ editors, and that includes our managing editor, Claudia Naidu, who is really so helpful if you need information on the technical aspects of submission. Worked together, the three of us worked together. We put together the SAMJ specialties. It's a quarterly publication, and it's designed to feature medical research and innovations in healthcare. And we forward-looking, so if you have any publications that you'd like to put together on AI in healthcare, whether it's a review article, whether it's an opinion piece, remember, we have the specialties for you. Now, I just want to emphasize that all the criteria and benefits of publishing in the SAMJ apply to specialties as well. It's strictly peer-reviewed. You will You'll have to jump through several hoops before you get that article finally published, but it's worth the blood, sweat, and tears. And we are encouraging our MEDs to publish in specialties. And if you'd like to publish your research in specialties, please contact me directly. Now, I'm going to tell you about some of the common problems I've seen with research that has been submitted by MMED students directly to the SAMJs thus far. And, you know, this causes real delays in publications and oftentimes rejections as well. Sometimes, and I don't know who you talk to, but the publication comes in with your name, your supervisor's name, and a whole lot of other names listed. But what happens is the researcher or the MMED student submits the full research report. Some institutions call it a mini dissertation. They don't convert it into a scholarly article. And we've just got to send it back. Then if they submit the article is sometimes full of track changes, and we have to send it back. Prof. Bima actually did bring this up. Now we need you to submit, and there's authorship guidelines. You must go into that and go through that carefully. But then we need you to submit a Word document, but we get PDFs submitted instead, have to go back. We need two versions. We need a version with identifiers, so your names, your co-authors' names, etc., institutions, etc. And we also need an anonymized version. And the anonymized version is really important because when you see, in terms of the criteria we use, and this is both national and international standards that we follow. We have a double-blind peer review. So we send, for peer review, and we remove all your details. And when we send back comments from the reviewers to the authors, we also send this back anonymously. So that's the double blind. We send to two reviewers. And where both the reviewers come back with comments that are aligned, we will then send the comments through to the author to consider. But oftentimes, we've got to go for 3 reviews. So all this actually then, has an impact on your turnaround time. And why do we go for 3 reviewers? And that's when 2 reviewers come back with where the reviews are not aligned. And one might say, fine, accept, or, revisions are required. And the other one would say, no, reject outright. Then we go for a 3rd reviewer as well. So, and I guess what I'm trying to say is the review process, while it's supposed to take 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes can take much longer. And your turnaround time will be much, much longer than this if you actually, don't pay attention to detail when you're submitting. Very, very important. And Professor Bima has brought this up as well. Oftentimes, you forget to put in that you've actually received Research Ethics Committee approval. Do not use the term institutional review board. We do not have institutional review boards in South Africa. Our National Health Act specifies that we are research ethics committees. If you send in something that says you got review from an approval from an institutional review board, I send it back to you. Who's that? That's not something that we have in our country. So please ensure that you include Research Ethics Committee approval. Importantly, if you have any concerns or queries, contact me and discuss with me, especially if you want to do a review article or an editorial or an in-practice article where you want to, send through a case report. Contact me, talk to me about it. Let's see whether it's something that we think could be published in the SAMJ or in the specialities. And also very important, don't let your publication stop at a publication and gather dust in cyberspace. Make sure that you disseminate your publication widely. And how? How do you do it? Try to get into as many conferences as possible and present your articles, present your research at the conferences. And so now I'll do a marketing bit. Our SARA Summit is going to be held in May next year. We've had a call out for abstracts, for presentation of research, and of course, there's going to be prizes that go with the best scientific papers, etc. I don't know if you've seen the call, but please submit your abstracts and try to get into the SARA conference, the SARA Summit. It's a full health summit next year on the, what do you call it? Is it the Millionaire's Mile or the Golden Mile out on the beachfront in Durban? Please try to get there. And I think at this stage, I'll stop. And if there's any questions regarding anything that I've said or any queries about SAMJ or SAMJ specialties, I'm happy to take that. Thank you. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Prof. Dai. Am I back? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Your technology was fighting me there, but I'm so glad to be back. Thank you very much, Prof. Dai. I think that what is apparent is the depth of knowledge that we have in SARA. And I think as registrars, we're so lucky to be having the acting editor of the SAMJ and to have a journal that is supportive of registrars. Before we move into the question and answer session, Rainier, I would like to ask if you could please put the poll up for us. So registrars, colleagues who are online, we're about to put up a poll. And the aim of this poll is to find out where exactly you are in your research. And this will feed into how we can cater to you for our MMED writing retreat. So last year we held our first MMED writing retreat, and this year we'll be holding the second. And in order for us to tailor the approach or to tailor this day, we would humbly like for you guys to please complete this poll to help us gauge and to decide how we can run the day and how we can serve you better. So while you're doing that in the background, I'll give, I think there was a question in the Q&A. The first question was earlier, and the first question, this was before I logged out. The first question was, what is the average? So I'll pose this question to Prof. Dai, and the next question, sorry, Prof. Dai can take this question. The first question is, what is the average turnaround response to a manuscript? And then maybe Prof. Bima can start thinking about the next question. That is there an effect of one publication? Sorry, is there an effect if one publishes in a low impact journal as opposed to a high impact journal?
So I'll take that question in terms of the SAMJ and average turnaround time. Like I said, it depends on the quality of your submission. If you've followed authorship guidelines and if you've followed all our policy guidelines and you've submitted and there isn't any problem, what happens is, I'll explain to you the situation. I look at the article, I do an initial editorial review. I then send this across to our editorial advisory board, who then do their reviews, and there's 3 of them on the board at the moment. They do their reviews independently and then send them to me, and I then look at, I collate their responses and see whether this can now go out for peer review, or whether this is something that, yes, they agree with me, it's not for our journal, or they disagree with me and feel that it's for our journal, although I feel it isn't. So I get guided by them as well. So this takes about a week. Then we send it out for peer review, and we give our reviewers 4 to 6 weeks. Trust me, they never get back in 4 to 6 weeks, and we've got to be constantly reminding them. Remember, our peer reviewers are most of them are really, really very, very busy academics, juggling their workload with reviewing for us as well. So now we're looking at about 7 weeks. The responses come back. Now, this is the ideal situation. At week 7, I get both the reviewers' responses. I go through them to see whether they've reviewed appropriately, whether what the questions they ask, whether they make sense, and whether they would be clear enough for our authors. And then I collate these and send them across to the authors, and we give the authors a month to get back. And then the authors write back to me to say they really appreciate the reviewer comments. They won't be able to send back within that stipulated 1 month because they've got heavy schedules as well. They ask for an extension. We usually give them a 2 to 3 week extension. So you're looking at about 3-4 months, best case scenario. Okay, worst case scenario, it can go on for much longer. Thanks. Over to you, Sharon. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, Prof. I think that was quite clear. Our next question, now this is for Prof. Beamer, is there an effect if one publishes in a low impact journal?
So, Sharon, why do you give me the difficult questions? Okay, listen. So, really, it depends on where you are standing, okay? Now, if you are doing an MMED for the purposes of passing your exam and going into practice, I mean, all you are interested in it is your article going to be published, okay? I have many of my registrars say, look, I'm not interested in whether it's in the Kidney International or whether it's in the South African Journal of Child Health. One is very high impact, the other one is not so high impact. So all they want is the article to be published. But for those of you who are interested in doing academic medicine, God forbid, okay, then you're going to aim for high impact journals, because high impact journals actually catch an audience which a more august audience. So if you have an article that you publish in, say, the Lancet, then for your dissemination of knowledge, etc., it's going to go to readers that are really interested in that particular field, right? The second thing is, and that is for personal growth, is that if you are applying for promotion, etc., academic promotions, etc., they look at what type of journal you publish in. So journals are divided into 4 types: Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Okay, and that type of journal might fall into a Q1, which means it's very high impact. But if it falls into Q4, then it's low impact. So that also determines how much citations you get, etc. So yes, it does make an impact, but at registrar level, I think that shouldn't be too much of an interest. I hope that answers the question, Sharon.
If I may come in, Sharon, on the impact issue, This is very loaded, and it's really controversial, and there's lots of discussion about it
Yeah.
currently in terms of the ethics of it all. High impact, yes, mostly in the Western journals from the Western countries. And why? It's because we've been so colonized globally in our minds that if we're going to be citing articles, we go to cite from the high impact journals, the Lancet's, New England Journal of Medicine, etc. Okay. And this is where Africa has been making a lot of noise recently. And African authors feel and editors and journal owners as well, feel, are really concerned about just pushing the impact factor. And this is where institutions are highly criticized as well. Because if your citation index increases, the citations increase depending on, or your impact factor will increase depending on how frequently your articles are cited. Now, given the Lancet and given the SAMJ, would one want to cite the Lancet or reference the Lancet, or would one want to reference the SAMJ? So one needs to consider this as well. And what I'm going to encourage our authors is, when you're actually writing, look at home. Write for your context. Look at the relevance and try to cite articles from your home-based journals. You help us increase our impact factor as well. Having said that, SAMJ is not doing badly. Okay? It's not high impact. It's not what is the Lancet, 60 or 70 or something? Prof. Bima, it's not there. It's 2.2. But I would think it is one of the higher impact journals in the country and in Africa, in the region. So, and you look at others, and you look at journals in other disciplines, they're still struggling to reach the one. Okay, so I think one needs to, if you want, please don't think that if you're not publishing in a high impact journal, your research isn't worth it. If your research has social value, it doesn't matter, except for your career climb, which journal you publish in. Publish in a local journal. It will be available to the readership in the country, and it will have its impact there. Okay, and that's coming out again.
Thank you for your very interesting perspective. But I think
I should have told
Yeah.
Dai when I was applying for my promotion to sit on the promotions committee.
Exactly.
Because the promotions committee, they're not interested in anything. Okay. Anyway.
You're
That was just a
motivating to
joke.
the wrong. We had another question from the audience. Full disclosure, this is actually someone who is a part of SARA. And so the question is whether or not SAMJ would accept an article that's mixed qualitative and quantitative research. So that's for Prof. Dai.
So it depends on the type of qualitative research. If you have a questionnaire or a survey, that's relevant. okay? And it's not open-ended. So,
You know, mm,
and if it's not open-ended and open to interpretation, we may consider it. But
no,
it's qualitative, and you're looking at in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, semi-structured interviews, etc. That's for social science journal, not for SAMJ. SAMJ looks at things very medically. I know that most research now is multidisciplinary and can have a qualitative component as well. But within the scope of our journal, we do not entertain the social sciences type of qualitative research.
Thank you, Prof. I think Prof. Bima has something to.
With Prof. Bima stressing
yeah,
that
no,
your results need to be generalizable.
yeah,
Often
exactly.
with qualitative studies, you can't generalize your results. If you're doing interviews, you do 20, or you stop before 20 once you've reached saturation. So you may have only 10 and you've reached saturation. You can't generalize this at all. You can't generalize it even to that local context. Okay, so I don't know. I hope that Shapile, you're not getting distressed because you've got a quali-quanti project.
I think he is.
So,
But I'll also encourage you to reach out to one of you. Yes, Prof. Bima?
sorry, so just to tell you that, you must think that qualitative research is inferior to quantitative research, okay? And often we get mixed methods research, so that's quantitative and qualitative. Let me tell you, I have one of my nursing managers. I was in dialysis unit, and she said to me, Prof, would you mind please looking at my article and reviewing it? It took me 3 days because she did a qualitative research. And the way you review a qualitative research study for a PhD is not easy. It's a completely different animal altogether, and there's various steps you have to go through to review the article. So I didn't go into that because I think most registrars will not be doing qualitative studies, but it's something that's quite intensive. And if you look at the way it's published in social science, etc., it's also something that takes up a lot of time. So it's not inferior. You understand? I mean, just that we are used to quantitative research, and therefore, like SAMJ, etc., sticks to that. Because in medicine, we try and quantify everything.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I totally agree with you. It's not inferior.
Yeah.
And, the PhDs, masters that I've supervised in bioethics and health law, most of them qualitative.
Qualitative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I just want to
Oof.
give a big thank you to you, Prof. Bima, for your time, for your
Welcome.
effort, for the excellent presentation. Prof. Dai, thank you very much for your insight, for your knowledge, and for all your perspectives. Colleagues, I'd like to encourage you to please be on the lookout. We will be advertising our research day, which is coming up in November. So please be on the lookout for that. I would like to thank the team, Dr. Monique Mohali, Dr. Mbali Ngomezulu, Renier Latachan, the entire summer team, Zianda. Colleagues, thank you very much for a very engaging evening, and I hope that you all learned and took something home this evening. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
So just before we go, I want to thank the organizing committee for inviting Prof. Dai and myself, and we hope we did justice to this talk. Okay? All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll be calling upon you soon.